Today, I want to talk to you about a belief that is so prevalent in our industry, whether you realize it or not, and probably prevalent somewhere in your brain, whether you realize it or not. The idea is that because we went through something, therefore the next generation has to too. So I struggled through whatever, therefore you have to work through the same thing to, prove yourself worthy, show your determination, develop discipline. I don't know what the actual logical sequence to that is, but it comes up a lot. If you want a core, extreme example of this in the music industry, I'd say the film Whiplash showcases a level of this that is pretty extreme. So I'm not saying most of us are being that rough on our students or that most students have that experience, but I am saying that there's a belief underlying that which bleeds through for many different teachers, which is, I struggled, you should too. I went through this many hours of practice, you have to do it too. I did this, so you have to too. Or I came through the other side, so why can't you? It's this kind of thinking that leads students to believe, or teachers to believe, that if you don't practice, 5, 10, umpteen hours per day, you're not trying, or you're not worthy, or you're not on the college track, right? We talk much more in recent years, which is great, about effective practice and using our time wisely, and it's so important. But there's still this idea out there about practice and about many other things, that if it's not hard, you don't deserve the result at the end of it. If you didn't work hard, if you didn't find it to be difficult, if you didn't put in elbow grease, then you don't deserve to get the good result. Now, look, listen, I can already hear many of you screaming. So, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that it's not difficult to learn an instrument. It absolutely is. It takes grit and determination and many, many, many hours of practice. It is just hard. And that's often what at least a certain brand of adult student that I have doesn't really appreciate, even though they know intellectually that learning a musical instrument is hard, and they will say those words out loud, and they'll say that they understand that kids who play a music instrument are practicing for hours. They don't really get how hard it is until they tried it, because some part of them thinks, yeah, but I've learned many things in my life by now, or I have this big high-powered job, or whatever the case may be. And so some part of them thinks, it can't actually be that hard. It reminds me of that little meme that comes up from time to time on social media, which is these two kind of slides. And one has a music teacher teaching at a blackboard, and the quote says, "Hey, it's not rocket science." And then a rocket scientist teaching at the blackboard, and it says, "Hey, it's not music theory." Look, I don't think music theory has to be that hard, but I do think it is difficult to put in the level of effort required to play an instrument well, because there's a lot of different components there. It's not to say that sport doesn't have its intellectual components, but mostly that's about muscle memory, and we're talking about many things put together. That's why there's been so many studies done on the effects on the brain of learning a music instrument, especially when you're young. Anyway, that's a side note. The point is, it takes a lot. I'm not saying that our students should find it easy, or we should press some kind of accelerator button and help them jump to the end result, because that's impossible. What I am saying is this: we don't need to make it hard on purpose. And most of us are not doing that intentionally, okay? I mean, probably none of you watching this video are doing that intentionally. We're not in that club over here. But some of us still have these core beliefs underlying what we're doing that says, yeah, but you just need to push through. I'm not going to make this any easier for you, student, because you need to show some level of grit. Here's the thing. I think that if we take that approach, we are denying them an opportunity to develop discipline towards a goal. So we're saying, oh, you just have to get through this amount of Hanen, or you have to study Bach. I'm not saying Bach's not important. I'm just saying we have some idea in our brain that says you have to do this to show me that you're worthy of this. I went to a fantastic lecture that this makes me think of last summer when I was in the Australasian Piano Pedagogy Conference from Paul Harris, who's from the UK. So we both travelled all the way to Australia, and he gave a session there about unconditional teaching, which I believe is his latest book. He may have released another one by now. He's like a book machine, but anyway, unconditional teaching. And this is one of those conditions. If you show me that you can do this, I will let you do that. And sometimes we do that with scales or Hanen or learning a Bach thing before you can learn Fur-Elise or whatever the deal is. And often it's not as black and white or explicit or outlined as that. So that's why we have to be careful to catch these things. This form of thinking that, yeah, but you just need to push through. Because I did it, so you can too. On some level that's true. But on another level, we need to make things easier. This video is sponsored by Vibrant Music Teaching. Leave boredom, burnout, and imposter syndrome behind with vibrantmusicteaching.com. Access a library of games, courses, and tools to keep your students engaged and learning. Join a global community of music teachers and grow your skills with confidence. Sign up today and bring fresh energy to your lessons. So let's think about it like this. Let's think about it from a place of privilege. I know, that's like a buzzword and maybe you won't like me using it, but just bear with me. Let's go with the dictionary definition of privilege and just leave aside any baggage for a second. We all have various privileges, and some are the ones that aren't talked about, and this is one of those. I was born with many privileges, of course, but I was born with a privilege, I believe, that is somehow baked into me. I don't think this is something that I just learned, and that is grit. I think some people are born, just like some people are born with certain talents or certain abilities or whatever, some people are born with a higher natural level of grit, of resilience, of stick-to-itiveness, right? I've often said that that's my one talent, right? I'm not very naturally good at many things that I try for the first time. I mean, when I was a kid and trying different hobbies and whatever, I wasn't the one who caught on the fastest. Not with piano, not with basically anything else. It's always sort of middling. But what I did was I stayed. So anywhere I got with all these different activities I did as a child and as a teen and hopefully into adulthood is because I just keep going. I just had this ability to keep going. And I think you probably share that with me a little bit. Maybe you don't, but I'd say a higher percentage than the global average of music teachers are people who are born with a higher level of stick-to-itiveness or grit. If we don't have that, probably a larger percentage of the minority that's left will probably have had parents who subbed in for that, right? They made you stick to it. So, if we're in that camp, we admit that we were born with a higher level of this ability to stick with things when they feel hard than others. Then we're being exclusionary if we have this mentality of, I struggled, so you should too. Because the struggle for us didn't feel the same as the struggle does for every person, right? Nothing feels the same for different people, but in general, it didn't feel the same. And so those students that quit when we let them struggle too much out of their comfort zone of struggle level, was it their fault? Or did we miss an opportunity? The other reason I think this is important, aside from just natural abilities and not being discriminatory essentially against hidden talents that people have or don't have, the other part of this is the world is getting less gritty. I mean, can we just say it like that? People are less able to stick with stuff. And I'm not talking about children. Not only children. I've seen this. And let me know in the comments if you think this is true too. I've seen this across the board. People are less able to focus, to concentrate, and to stick with tasks than they used to be, even a few years ago. I do think COVID made this worse, but I think there are many factors, and I'm not someone who's studying this. This is just all anecdotal, but the parents I deal with, the students I deal with, the random people I deal with in my day-to-day life are far, far less gritty with everyday tasks. And I don't think it's that they're not trying. I don't think it's that they're all naturally ungritty. I think it's that there's too much. There's too much for them to do, and there's too much demanding their attention. And so I can see it in people. Like, I gave the example of parents, right? New parents that I meet for the first time in interviews, prospective student parents. I meet them, and some of them are still here in the present, but so many of them, much more than it was before, are so scattered. Like, you can get their attention when they're directly in front of you, but you can't get them to read an email properly. You can't get them to notice every detail. And there have always been people who couldn't do that, but I think it's a bit of an epidemic. I think it's getting worse. So what I'm saying is, we're the cure. We're the antidote to this. If we have these people in lessons with us, they have this opportunity, and we have the opportunity to help them to develop more resilience, to be able to stick with a task until it's completed. But we have to help them to do that. We can't just say, oh, I know it's hard, keep going anyway, or worse than that, no, it's not hard, don't be silly, just do it. Nike is the worst advice here. It's not just do it. It's I'm going to help you to make it feel easier so that you can go through all these steps despite having a naturally lower grit level or being influenced by society or both to have a lower grit level. I can help you work through this problem, get to the end of it, and feel like, yes, I did it. And I can help you do that over and over and over again. So yes, students have to put in effort, but it's not, we should just say, well, you have to practice 1 hour a day or you don't deserve to be in my studio. It's not, you must just learn this piece by yourself because you need to prove to me you're worthy of studying with me. That's not going to get them there. If we do that, we're not being inclusive in the broadest sense. We are targeting this tiny minority, vanishingly small, getting smaller minority of the population who can do that. Who can do that despite the fact that they have 1,000,001 things on their plate. Even if they're a child, they still have 1,000,001 things on their plate. They've got all these school demands, and then they've got all these extracurricular activities, and we're the only ones, almost the only ones, demanding that they then put in this extra time towards this thing that no one is holding them accountable to, right? So yes, the school demands assignments and whatever, but there are consequences to that, and they know it's more serious. An extracurricular activity where their parent is probably going to defer to the child's judgment in most cases about whether they should continue doing it or not. We can't say, you just have to push through, you just have to do it. Why aren't you doing an hour and a half of practice a day? Why aren't you doing this and that? I did it, so you should be able to do it too. One last little note on this whole struggle bus thing. Are we even being accurate? Yes, we went through the factual part, right? So we remember it as our teacher said we had to learn Hanan, and so we did. We all know memories aren't the most reliable, and especially a child's memories. So if you think, I just got on with it, maybe you did. Maybe that's accurate. Maybe you had more help than you remember. If you remember that your teacher was really punitive, horrible, had a high level of demand on your time or your efforts, They probably did. Like, you're probably remembering that accurately. But was there someone else who was helping you through it to compensate for that? Were you really all on your own? And if you were, I'm sorry, that's horrible. But we don't want to pass that on, do we? Let's change the script. This isn't what music lessons have to be. There's literally no logic to this. And I think sometimes the reason for this worthiness or struggling through, or you have to prove something about yourself in order to whatever the qualification is. I think sometimes that happens in music, and I see it in art more than in serious things, because we're trying to prove that we're serious. So if this is our counter reaction to society saying, oh, it's STEM, not STEAM, arts and music aren't important, they're not the most valuable thing, they are an optional extra in primary schools here, all of those things, right? And then so we're trying to fight against it and say, no, it is serious. And I think that's the wrong direction. That's really what I've been saying here from the start. Fun is not a 4-letter word. We shouldn't let the fact that people have a poor view of music and think of it as, oh, just playing around or messing around or whatever. Are we going to let them dictate what music is? Because that's what you're doing if this is your reaction to that. If your reaction to people saying, oh, your job is just playing with kids for a few hours every day, is to not play with the kids. No, we've gone the wrong direction. Let's choose a new route. Let's go back to Google Maps and put in the correct address, because that is the wrong way to go. That's not what we want to do. Yes, it is also really hard work. And yes, we have a real job to do. And yes, music is extremely valuable. It can help children with so many other things, but it is also valuable in and of itself. We know these things. But the way to fight that fire is not with more fire of seriousness. It's with literally a water gun, right? It's with coming along and saying, yes, it's valuable, and it's this and it's that. And part of the reason it is those things is because it's fun, because it's play, and because that's what humans, especially children, but all humans, were designed to do. Let's think about what musicians the world is missing out on because of this attitude. And let's be the ones to make the change. Let's try and catch ourselves. And if you think there's no part of your brain that does this, I promise you there is. It happens to me. I'm in that moment and I realized I'm asking a student to do something and I'm not making it easier when I could. Now, sometimes there's desirable difficulty. I'm not talking about that. But when deep down, actually, you could have made it easier and that would have made them more successful. And in the long run, they would have been better off. And we're holding on to this idea that somehow they have to go through something we went through. That's just not true. So let me know if you recognize this thought pattern. Let me know if you have some examples of it. I'd love to hear them. And I hope you enjoyed this little exploration into the struggle bus and when it's really necessary.